thought what I'd do is I'd share with you some of the discussions that the committee had last week. We had a virtual committee meeting. So I just wanted to share a few points with you just to keep you guys up to date on some of the things that we're talking about and decisions we're taking. I'm going to mute you all just so that if I can find out how to do it. I always struggle with this. So let me mute you all so that we can carry on. Yes, basically we're keeping in touch with the football club, Thatcham Town Football Club, just to keep the lines of communication open, because obviously, you know, we walked away and said, well, we don't want to hire that hall anymore. We thought it would be useful just to keep in touch, keep them engaged. So Stuart's doing that for us on an ad hoc basis, and just having a conversation with them. We did discuss also, you know, when could we get back together with face-to-face meetings? What's the likely timescale of that? This is my personal opinion. I don't know any more than you guys, but I just think it's going to be unlikely that we'll be in face-to-face meetings before September. And even then, it might be longer than that, because some of us, myself certainly, I've got to be very careful that I don't catch the virus because of chest problems. So it may be that all of you might be feeling the same way. But what we said we would do is, if restrictions are being relaxed nearer that time, then we'll go out to you guys and we'll ask your opinions on what we should do. Obviously, there are opportunities for social distancing in the hall itself. We could all sit 2 meters apart. But getting through the corridor to and from the loos, the bar, all that kind of stuff could be a bit messy. So again, we've got to keep in touch with the football club to see what their policy is going to be. So basically, we're going to keep an eye on it, and we'll stay communicating with them. We'll stay communicating with you. And then obviously we'd all like to get back face to face when we can, but we don't want to do it too quick. A little bit of discussion about these meetings that we've had, and generally the consensus was that everyone's liking them, that it's going okay. With regards to the attendee list, Sue has volunteered to take note of all the people that are on the call and update a central spreadsheet we've got on a shared drive. So I won't need to ask you to type your names in the chat window at the end, hooray. So that's a little bit of easing off of some of the extra workload for you guys. And we're now beginning to look at bringing in some guest speakers. And obviously tonight we've asked Andrew to take a session, and we're looking at others as well. So we'll keep you informed of what we're doing. And next slide. On the project vote, we discussed how that's all going. Generally, again, the consensus was that it's going well. You guys are submitting more photos electronically than you print and bring to meetings. So generally, we're getting more from you electronically, and I guess that's because you don't have the bother of printing it, mounting it, and bringing it to the meeting. And that's all cool, that's all fine. The voting process that we've got seems to be working well, so we'll, you know, we'll keep that. Maybe, and not for discussion really now, but just sow a seed of thought, when we get back face to face, maybe we continue with the current voting process. We do it electronically, have the vote electronically, then when we get back to the face-to-face meeting, we can announce the winners. Something to consider. Thatcham Festival, Thatcham Festival, thank you. we don't know what's going to happen with regards to the current events that are in the calendar. Some are coming up in June. We're not sure if they're going to go ahead. We're not sure if the Blue Coat School exhibition will go ahead at the end of, in early October. We don't know is the short answer. So again, we're keeping an eye on it, seeing what's going on. The other thought that we discussed when we were talking about this in the meeting was, it's all very well us saying, oh, don't forget to do the Kennet and Avon vote. Now that you can go out and exercise more regularly, then why don't you go down the Kennet and Avon and take photos? And that's all a lot of pressure. And we feel we've been under pressure enough. So we don't want to put a lot of pressure on you guys that as soon as restrictions are being relaxed, now go out and do this, now go out and do that. We're just toning things down a little bit. So we've pretty much decided to cancel the collage thing with the Kennet and Avon photography, because even if restrictions are lifted, say September restrictions are lifted, that only gives us less than a month to get the photos done, collect them, put them together and print something that we could then put on exhibition. And so we've decided that let's not put ourselves all under that pressure. If we end up doing some kind of exhibition at the Blue Coat School, the least we could do is take all the project vote photos that you've submitted over the last few months, print them all, and hey presto, we've got ourselves an exhibition. So we're going to play things gentle and soft and see how things go. We don't want to put unnecessary pressure on you guys to go out and do stuff. But obviously we're still going to carry on with the two things that we've got going at the moment. And they are, it keeps losing focus, the project vote. Here are the dates that you've got to work to. So submissions by the 22nd, please. So we're going to continue with the monthly votes. And then obviously also at the moment we've got the photo editing challenge as well. And some of you have already submitted some entries. And I have to say, some of them are very good, very imaginative. And that's by the 5th of June. So if you carry on with those, but everything else, we're just going to be chilled about and see how things develop. Okay, that's all I really wanted to say. So Andrew is kindly volunteered to cover a few subjects for us tonight. And these are the things that we haven't really gone through in any detail. So Andrew's agreed to go into some of those. Getting the colour right in our photos is always a bit of a challenge. And if you're taking photos of buildings in particular and you're taking them close up and the lens is quite a wide angle lens, you're going to get what's known as keystone distortion. And that's where the edges of the building are either coming in or going out. And how do you deal with that? And then if there's time, he'll go into some of the levels and curves, historical tools that are in these products. So without further ado, I'm going to transfer ownership to him. So let me stop sharing mine, and then I'll unmute Andrew.
Do you just want to go through the way people can remove the grid in the top right corner so that they can see where?
Yeah, sure. When we're screen sharing, the little icons of the videos of all of us appears on the right-hand side on a desktop. On an iPad, not so sure how it appears. But there should be little icons across the top of the window. And the little underscore on its own, if you hit that, it collapses all of the videos into nothing. And you might want to do that on your screen. If you're using an iPad, laptop kind of thing, you might find that those little video thumbnails are over the top of some of the menu systems that Andrew is going to go through. So if that is the case, then across the top of the window of the videos, there should be a little underscore. If you hit that, it should get rid of all the videos for you so that you can see all the menus.
Right. And when I've done the white balance stuff, do you want to stop for a minute to see if there's any questions before I move on to distortion?
Yeah, well, you'll be able to, as host, you'll be able to mute and unmute people. So if you want to do that, that's fine. Or if you just want to make me host, and then I can do that for you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I'm making you host now. So now you can share your...
Why is it on the wrong window? Right. Can you see that clearly, Ray?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Right. Okay. Right, so the first thing I was just going to mention before we go into doing the white balance and the color is about screen calibration. Now, I don't know how many of you already calibrate your screens, but I've got two screens that I use and they've both been calibrated so that they're the right color and the right brightness. Most laptops and desktops these days aren't too bad, but my previous laptop was a backlit one and it had a really horrible blue color cast if I didn't calibrate it. So I have, can you see that, Ray, the data color thing? Ray?
Yep.
Yeah, so I have an older model of this, which I use to calibrate the color and set the screen brightness with. When I was talking to Ray earlier, there had been some discussion before about the club buying one for members to use. So I don't know how far that discussion got. But on my MacBook that I've got at the moment, it doesn't make much difference. There's a slight change, but it really depends on the quality of the screen that your laptop's got as to whether you see a difference. And the other thing that I've turned off on my MacBook is it's got a setting for true tone where it adjusts the colors depending on the room light. So I've turned that off so that the colors don't change depending on what time of day I'm editing photos. So if we just go back to this image. Right, you can see Lightroom again, can you, Ray?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So when you open up the basic tab in Lightroom, you've got this panel here where you can set the white balance of your image. But before I go into that, I'm just going to mention this little panel above where it says Profile and Adobe Color. So if you click on here, these are what Adobe thinks the colors for each image should be. And I don't know whether you can see it, but there's just a little subtle change between each one. Can you see that, Ray, the subtle change?
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you click on these four boxes here, you get much more options. And you can actually see the Adobe ones. And then these ones here where it says camera matching, I shoot on a Canon camera. And when you shoot JPEGs in camera, you can choose a picture style. And these are actually the picture styles that are in my camera. So if I had shot this as a JPEG and I had picked the picture style of landscape, this is what the image would look like. And this also affects what the image looks like on the back of your camera. And I think I have all my cameras set to neutral. So I get a neutral image on the back of the camera so that it's not sort of, I don't think it's too bright or too vivid. But depending on your camera make and model, you will see different ones here. So you know, it's always worth having a look in here before you start editing, because you might find that you click on one of them and it basically gives you the edit for the image that you want. So it's always worth, and you actually can buy, I've got a few here, you can buy third-party ones, which just gives you looks. So it's always having a worth a quick look in there to see if there's anything that you like. Let me just clear this. Right. So if we go into the white balance tool itself, normally you'll see it's as shot. So that's the white balance that the camera picked when you took the image. And if you click on these two arrows, you can see all the other ones. And if you click through them, see the auto one makes it slightly warmer. And then daylight will be blue. And what I tend to like is when it's sort of this sort of weather, if you click on the cloudy one, it slightly warms the image up, which is what I tend to prefer. And then if you go through them, you'll see that tungsten just makes the image blue, because of course tungsten light is red. So if we go back up to add shot, and then you've got this little picker here where you can just click on anywhere in the image and it will set the white balance. And generally when you're using this picker, you're looking for something that's about 18% grey or a grey tone, because if I was to pick on something that's yellow, it's going to make the image blue. So in this image, it's somewhere in the clouds. And then if you want, you can just manually cool the image down or warm the image up if you want. And then this tint slider, I don't use very often, but you can, if you've got an image that you think's got a little bit of a green color cast, you can just move it into the magenta region and take out that green cast. Let me just put it back to auto. So if I go to this image here, so this image here, I've actually, oh no, not that image. Yes, here we are. So this image here was a sunset, and for me, as a sunset, it was too cool. So I've just put a little bit of warmth into the sky. And similar with this one. So
blink is turned on there.
yeah, yeah, I know the blinkers are on. Yeah. Where did I put the? Oh, no, too far down. It's funny, I went through this image last night. Oh yeah, now here we go. Right, where was what? I've lost the image I was going to show you. Too many images. Ah, right, here we go. So this is the one I reset this one so that I can go through, just go through it quickly. I mean, all this bits is Ray, what Ray covered before. So it's still a little, let's bring this shot a little bit. So now I've got a sort of rough image. I can start playing around with the temperature, so I can just warm this up to make it more like a sunset I want, and then I can bring a bit of magenta. But then what I was doing last night is, rather than doing the whole image, when Ray covered these before, you can actually put a gradient on. Oh no, wrong tool, sorry. And you can put a bit more. The color temperature is actually in all the brush, all the masking tools, so you can actually warm the sky up a bit more if you want. And then you would have to do something similar with the water to make the image stay the same. All right, so let me just come out of there. And so if you look at all these images that I took before, not one folder. Sorry, one folder. So all these images here were all taken at the same time, and I have just played about with the vibrance and the color temperature just to get different effects. Some of them are a bit hideous. So that's the same picture, just edited it slightly differently using saturation and color temperature. Whether you like it or not is purely taste. Right. Do you want to see if there's any questions so far, Ray?
Yeah, I think you will have to unmute.
Where is that?
So if you click on participants.
I seem to have lost the screen sharing. I seem to have lost the, oh, here we go, participants.
And then
Unmute all.
I think we can unmute ourselves if you want to talk to them, can't we?
All right. Yeah, no, I've unmuted all.
Oh, right. I thought I'd done myself.
Right. So I'm probably going a bit fast. I'm not very good at this speaking bit to people, but are there any questions so far or any things?
I think Ray, sorry, I think you were just going a little bit fast there.
Right.
Because you were going from one side to the other and not saying what tool you were just exactly on before we went over the other side, Andrew.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I've not done this before, so
yeah,
it's
you have to slow down a little bit so we can follow you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't want to go through all this editing again because Ray had already done that.
No, just quickly, you know, an outline of what you're doing.
Yeah, enough time was using the masks, which I've covered before, but yeah, okay.
Good reminder.
Which phone is that? Right, well, what I'll do is I'll restart with this image and I'll go a bit more slowly. Okay, and I'll leave everybody on unmuted and then they can ask questions as they go. Or and actually I use this one because it's darker. So obviously this image is a little bit on the dark side. And if you look at the histogram, you can see it's all to the left. So,
Use any filters on there, Andrew?
Pardon?
You use any filters on there?
No, I didn't have any at the time I took this. I've got some now, but it's one of those things where I put them in my camera bag and I never get them out. I should do because they cost me a lot of money. So, but you know, I mean, it's a sunset picture, so it's not going to be that bright. But if we bring so I've got the highlight warnings turned back. So these two little arrows here, you can turn your warnings on and off. So you can see that there's a little bit of clipping going on in the middle here. But if I just bring the exposure up for the general image, and I think from memory, it was sort of around that light level. And then what I can do now is now I've got this bit blown out in the middle, I can use the white slider to try and get rid of it. And that brings it down, and then I can use the highlight slider just to get rid of it a little bit more. As I bring the highlight slider down, you can see in the middle, it just brings a little bit of the color back in. And then if I want to bring some more detail out in this land area, I can just bring the blacks up a little bit and bring the shadows up a bit. Now, one little tip is when you're in this area, when you go up to the histogram, you can see as I move the cursor across, it highlights different parts of the histogram. And then if you look down at the tools, I don't know why I'm pointing at my screen. If you look down at the tools, you can see as I move the cursor across the histogram, it highlights the section of the histogram. It actually highlights the tool that would adjust that. So, so you can see if I wanted to adjust this area, it's highlighting the shadow tool. So I think that's probably about there for the tonal range. And then I always just give it a little bit of clarity, not too much, otherwise it goes hideous, and then just a little bit of texture. So now I can play with the white balance and just bring a little bit more warmth to make it more look like a sunset in there. And if I want to, just a little bit more, just a little bit of magenta. And then if you really want, you can give it a little bit more saturation, but that's too much. So just a touch on saturation. And that would probably be there. But going back to the masking tools, so there's several ways you could mask the sky. You could just, so this little button here turns the mask on, and you just paint the mask in really roughly. And then for this bit down here, if you want, you could zoom in and brush it out, but all the tools in Lightroom now have this range mask. So if you click on it, you've got a choice of color or luminance. If you select luminance, you can tell it to start including the brights in the mask, or you can tell it to stop including the darks. And you can see that as I move that over, it starts taking the land out of the mask. And now if I turn the mask off, I can just add a little bit more warmth into the sky if I want to. Yeah. So any questions on that?
No, that's a lot better.
Yeah, I'm not very good at this. So
But funny enough, the tint that we've got in Element,
yeah,
it's not as good as the Lightroom one. It tends to go rather quick, you know. It's there's not much movement before you've really adjusted everything on it.
yeah.
So you have to move that rather slowly.
Yeah, so now, I mean, now that I've done that mask and I've done that tint, down here there's a density slider, and I can just crank. Oh. Why isn't that working?
I think what you'll find, Stuart, is that in Lightroom, you've got infinitely more control
Definitely.
over what you're applying, and you can do it brutally, or you can start brutal and then tone it back a little bit. So it's you've got much more flexibility.
Yeah.
Right, so is there any more questions on that one?
Andrew.
It's all very quiet.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be worthwhile mentioning exactly what white balance is?
Yes, I was going to do that with the next image.
Right.
Yeah. I'll move on. What I'll do is I'll move on to the next image.
Text in the post, Paul.
So
Well, I'd have started with that, but there you go.
yeah, well, I didn't know what level. I didn't know what level of, you know, how much people knew about white balance and everything. So, you know, I didn't really know whether to start with it or not. I didn't know what to. So, you know, go back to Paul's comment.
Then you're fine.
Pardon?
If you do idiot proof, you'll be fine.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to do that.
Works for me, idiot proof.
Right. So basically, white balance is the color of the light. So daylight is about 5,500 Kelvin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you, I mean, you can see it on the slide here. So, you know, as you warm the image up, you know, this image is now at 10,000 Kelvin. And as you cool it down, it's at 2,000 Kelvin. So your incandescent lights, actually,
If I can interject there, Andrew, there's what the hell's Kelvin? Well, this is a scientific way of measuring temperature, and where color balance comes from is if you take
I'm just going to share an image while you're talking. It's a different image while you're talking, right?
Okay, if you take an object and you heat it up, so if you take a bit of metal, here you go, you take a bit of metal and you start to heat it up, it will go cherry red, and if you make it hotter and hotter, it will go to yellow, to white, to blue. So it's a scientific way of measuring temperature by the color that the object is showing you. And when it comes to photography, what you're saying is, well, daylight is the norm. So because, you know, we're on this planet, we've got a sun, and daylight is the normal.
Right,
And if you look on this color chart,
sorry, I moved it. There's a better one there because it's got flash on it and daylight.
Okay, so if you look on the Kelvin scale, the top right image there, you'll see daylight is around about 6,000 odd degrees Kelvin, which is its measure of temperature. But then you'll see that tungsten bulb is way down at 3,000, and that the color is associated with that is much more orangey and red. So if you're taking pictures where you've got old school tungsten bulbs, the very nature of those bulbs is casting a red orangey color on the subject. Now your brains, your eyes and your brains compensate for that automatically. You're not really aware of it, but your camera can't. So the camera's got an auto feature, so often the camera can deal with it, but sometimes you have to step in and adjust it either in camera or in post-processing, and that's what Andrew's going to talk about now.
Yeah, sorry.
Does that make it clearer for everyone what white balance is?
Yeah, I didn't want to assume it. I didn't think about talking about it, but I didn't want to assume that nobody knew what it was.
Oh, I assume nobody knows anything.
You assume they're all thick, do you? And start from there.
They don't dress like for nothing.
Right. So can you see?
It's not a question of people being thick.
No, I know.
No. I think the problem is that it's a question is that everyone's at a different level. If you've never heard it before, you don't know it. It's as simple as that.
I know.
And there will be people in the club who don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know.
So,
I mean, yeah, this is the first time I've done this, so I'm sort of learning as I'm going. So
no criticism, Andrew. Keep going. You're good.
No, okay. So yeah. So going back to what Ray was saying about the incandescent bulbs, and sometimes the camera gets it wrong. In this image here, the church was lit with tungsten bulbs, but it was still daylight outside, and the camera has picked up the windows and decided to use the windows to set the white balance. So you can see from this image that it's completely got the color of the instrument wrong. So you know, you can, if I change it to tungsten, you see now the instrument, although it's a little bit underexposed, so if I just brighten it a bit, there we go. The instrument now looks the right color, but the windows look too blue. So, you know, you have to balance what you want. You have to decide that, well, you want the instruments to look the right color, and you can try and fix the windows if you want. It really depends on what you're going to do with the image. So this is what I finished up with. I didn't really bother doing anything about the windows in my finished image. But yes,
that masking technique you were talking about earlier.
yeah, I tried doing that to the windows last night.
Yeah.
And it had trouble doing the mask nicely around the edge. But yes, you could take a brush and you could paint the right white balance into these windows if you wanted to. But then it's just, so if we do as shot, so this is the problem. So if we try and use the picker, you can see that because these instruments had a reddish color to them to begin with, it's now made the image too blue. He had a white shirt on. So yeah, so he had a white shirt on. So that's a lot better. Wrong button. Yes. So, I mean, going back to that other chart that we had up. So if you're using a flash in a room where there is tungsten lighting or fluorescent lighting, everything that's illuminated by the flash will be the right color balance, because the camera will automatically set the white balance for the flash gun. But anything that's being lit by the tungsten or the fluorescent bulb will be the wrong color. And what you can actually buy is you can buy gels that fit over your flash gun to make the flashlight the same color as the tungsten bulbs or the fluorescent bulbs. And then you set the white balance in your camera for tungsten or fluorescent, and then the whole image is the same white balance. Yeah? Is that clear?
You also get different strengths, like quarter, half,
Yeah.
and full.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some flash guns come with those gels anyway.
Yeah, I think the Canon ones I've got have got a little clip-on thing for tungsten bulbs.
Yeah, I've got one.
But it looks horrible. So.
Well, it's not a bulb, it's a clip-on just with plastic.
Yeah.
Or
Usually you only need a half.
Yeah, I've never actually tried it myself. Normally when I'm taking flash pictures, I've turned all the room lights off and drawn the curtains so that everything is just being illuminated by the flash gun.
And you've got to buy the CT orange or the CT blue. You can't just buy an orange or a blue.
Yeah.
It's got to be the color temperature one.
Yeah.
In a situation like this picture here, you can't turn the lights off, you can't turn the sun off. So, you're back to tweaking it in post-production.
Yes, so I mean, you could try. Let me just turn. So I don't know if Ray covered it, but there's a little button here called Auto Mask, and as long as I keep the crosshair, the little cross inside the windows, it should auto mask the edge. But you see, the windows are just too bright.
Also, the windows are feathered.
Yeah, it did try. It did try. I think this would be something that you'd have to go into Photoshop to and make proper selections.
In Photoshop, you could be much more precise about that.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, what you did with your previous photo is you cropped most of the windows out.
Yes.
And that's probably the best solution.
So you could, yeah. And the other thing is these windows are just too bright. I mean, you'd have to, yeah. So you're too bright for the color temperature slider to do anything with. It just doesn't work because of what they are.
not very good.
What temperature's LED lights?
They're bluish. Yeah, they're
You
blue.
can get warm as well, though.
Yeah, but your sort of your house lighting ones are your sort of office lighting ones, and your house lighting ones tend to be blue.
I would try flash or tungsten, not tungsten, flash or fluorescent with LED and see what it's like. And if it's still not right, then you're into using the picker tool.
Yeah.
Okie doke.
Yeah, but as Ray said, I think to save any grief with this one, I just chopped most, because the picture was for the instruments, so I just chopped most of the windows out. So any more questions on the white balance? I mean, I can go through. Oh, right. Yeah. So the other thing I was just going to cover. So going over to here to your white balance tool, all these options here, I've got all of these because I shot it as a raw image. Yeah. If you've taken your picture as a JPEG or you're working on a JPEG, you don't have those options anymore. You just have
an ugly bunch
of coconuts.
Yeah. I thought I deliberately picked that picture.
You better do something with these white legs.
Yeah, I got a bit of painting, a bit of warmth. With the colour.
They don't get sun in Scotland.
So yeah, no, because this is a JPEG, you see, I only have as shot, auto, and custom. So you're limited. And also, if you go into this tool that we looked at earlier, the Adobe one and the camera settings aren't there either, because that's already been burnt into the JPEG.
You always keep your clippers on there, Andrew, because it looks like you've got a blue tint in the bushes, whereas you haven't.
No, not always. Well, normally they wouldn't be. Normally they wouldn't be there for very long, because normally one of the sort of, you know, the first few adjustments I do to any image is exposure, and then sort of have a look at the highlights and shadows, and then almost straight away I set my whites.
Yeah, I just didn't know if everybody knew what those blue
and
red were.
Okay. Yes. So you up here in Lightroom, you can turn these clipping warnings on and off by pressing these little arrows.
The point of showing the warnings is that if it's clipping, what that means is that the histogram, as you see, is off the scale. You're losing data. It means you've got nothing there. So it's just white, 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 no shades. Similarly on the blacks, it's just jet black with no shades. So by having the warnings on like this, it shows you areas of the picture where you are losing data, and then you can use the sliders maybe to back things off and recover. So they can be quite useful.
Yeah, I mean, when you're sharing images on screen and to Instagram and Flickr and that, if you've got a little bit of clipping either end, it doesn't really matter too much. The main problem is if you've got white clipping. So if I clip, I've turned them off. Yeah. So if you've got white clippings, so like this, is when if I printed that now, where the reds are, the printer wouldn't actually put any ink down. It would just leave the white paper and it would look weird. So if you're printing, it's always worth making sure that you've got no clipping. And also with the blacks, it's always worth, when you're printing, oh yeah, I've turned it off again. That's why I leave it all on, because I always forget. So with black, when you print, it's always worth just having just a little bit of black, a few little bits of the blue, and then you get some nice blacks when you print. So let me just reset that. So I don't know, actually, well, let me just undo. So I don't know, in Lightroom, you can either do Command or Control Z to go back through things, or if you want, you can just come down here and click Reset. But that doesn't actually clear the history. And if you want to clear the history, you just come up to Develop. There's a little button and you can just clear the history. So you've got two ways of resetting the image if you want.
That's one of the good things of Lightroom, is that it saves the history. So when you go back to this image in a month or a year's time, the history of the edits you made are still there. Whereas in Photoshop, when you save the image, you lose the history of the edits you've made.
Yeah.
But Lightroom actually preserves the history, so you can look back and see what you did.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, this image, yes, this image here that I just was playing it. Yesterday I edited it. I did this edit, and I didn't really like the sky. And then just earlier I redid the edit and didn't do so much with the sky. But yes, as Ray says, I've got all my adjustments here.
Do you do all your photographs as widescreen then?
No, this one here, this bit of sky, I didn't like this bit. This bit of sky is not doing anything for the image, and I decided to get rid of this bit of bush. So that's why they crop like that. It's just
works better.
Yeah, and it's I don't know. It's something I've picked up from having. So I've had 2.5 years worth of images judged now, and one of the things that comes up a lot is cropping. Is cropping bits out of the image that aren't actually adding to it.
Yeah.
So in this image, you know, this bit of sky is actually not adding anything to the image at all.
It's interesting because if you look at the rule of thirds on that previous image,
yeah,
they say with landscapes, the horizon should be roughly on the rule of thirds line. If you go back to the other image, you're pretty much on the rule of thirds there.
Yeah, that's because in my camera, I've got the grid turned on, so I can see a grid like this through my viewfinder.
But here's an example where the rule of thirds doesn't actually help you much because it's giving you too much sky where there's not enough detail. So by doing the crop, you're actually further away from the thirds here. You're more
it's
on
not far off the third.
It's not far off. But
I mean, if I hadn't taken the little bit of grass, the little bit out this corner, it would have been.
Yeah, true. Yeah. It's not far off, but it's an example where the rule of thirds doesn't always work for you.
Yeah. But going back to the brush tool and the masking. So this one, I did all the adjustments on the whole image, and this one, I didn't actually do. Oh, sorry, wrong button. I actually drew before I did any editing. I just selected the bottom so that I didn't do, because I think I was adding too much when I was adding the contrast and the clarity to here. It was what was ruining the sky for me. Sorry.
I think, you know, it's very obvious from these images that it's well worth playing with masking and selective adjustments in masking.
Yeah.
You can really bring a picture back from oblivion just by doing a little bit of selective editing.
Yes. So, I mean, it's worth, so there are quite, let me just get my YouTube up. I will just share somebody with you on YouTube. Where is he? I've got so many YouTube. Right. Let me just swap screens. So you can see my web browser now.
Yep.
Yeah. So this guy, Matt Karlowski or whatever, he just calls himself Matt K. When Adobe release a update to Photoshop or Lightroom, he always does sort of short 5 or 10 minute talks on all the new features. So he's well worth following on YouTube, because as they add things to Lightroom, rather than you having to find somewhere and go through the whole learning Lightroom and Photoshop, he will do a little sort of 5 or 10 minute things of what's been added in the latest update.
It's well worth doing that. I do that, not with this guy, but there are others. But
yeah,
it is well worth it, because especially when you're starting out with this software, it's so overwhelming. But if you just go into little snippets like this, you pick up one little tip, one little trick, you play around with it, then next time you pick up another one, and it's an incremental process.
Yes, because the let me just put a mask in here. So this, I mean, this range mask is quite a new feature to the masks. So, you know, you've got the color where you can pick a color and tell it what colors you don't want or masked. And then you've got the luminance one, which I showed earlier. So you can just take the trees out of the mask.
I have to say that, you know, although this lockdown is a bad situation, it does give us all time to sit down and play and to experiment with these kind of features when normally you wouldn't have the time to do it. So I would encourage you to have a crack at it. What's the worst that can happen, right? So just have a go.
So are there any more questions on white balance? Any? It's very quiet.
I haven't left, so it must be good.
You haven't muted them all, have you?
No.
That's what no questions sounds like.
Oh, right, okay. So, I mean, I hope I'm doing this all right, because I've never done this before. You get your own, and it's all. I always find it. You use Lightroom and you do things your own way, and then you have to explain it to people, and you forget that you need to slow down and you need to tell everybody.
Knowing something's very easy. Teaching something is very hard.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, I think you're all on the WhatsApp group, so if you've got any follow-up questions that you think of afterwards, just put it on there and I'll either answer them, or I got loads of YouTube videos that I've watched. I can point you in the right direction for something if I can't answer it.
Do you use multiple adjustments on, say you have a lot of photographs, you know, like say 5,000 you have to go through. Would you be able to do in Lightroom multiple adjustments on certain photographs, like maybe landscape?
Yes. So if I go back to the live, if I go back to here, so what you can, where is it? Is it here? I haven't used it myself very
It's
much.
settings. If you go to library, you can settings.
Yeah, no, there is a.
There's a sync button down the bottom, on the bottom right hand side when you're in develop.
Yeah. It's in library, isn't it?
Oh no, I just realised what's missing. No.
You have to select the pictures, I think. If you select 2 or 3 pictures, I think it comes up with sync somewhere.
Yeah, if you select the pictures.
Oh yeah, sync settings.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, I've got it now. Yeah, yeah. I've never really used that because the few times I've used it, it's synced the wrong images.
Yeah, the way it works is normally the default is the first image in the selection.
Yeah.
It uses those settings to move them to all the other pictures.
Yeah.
You can change that, but that's the default. So if you now hit sync settings.
Yeah, it would sync those
No,
that
it
one.
won't. It'll give you a dialog box. Hit it now.
All right, yeah,
It now gives you the choice. What do you want to synchronize?
yeah.
Right.
And as you can see, you've got loads of things that you can synchronize.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing I ever did was, oh, it's being developed, is in the presets. I don't think I've got it in this version. User presets, yeah. Oh yes, I have. So start. I created this preset for start because I always added the same amount of clarity and contrast to most of my images.
Yeah.
And that start is just a little preset that adds that clarity.
Oh,
Yeah. All right. No, actually, it does a few more things. It's not the one I thought it was, but yeah. So that just. So yeah, you can create. If you find yourself doing the same thing to every image, you can just create yourself a little preset.
just to start it off. Right.
Just to start it off.
Okay,
And
guys.
you can actually, going back to, going back to what Ray did last week with importing, you can actually apply a preset when you're importing your images.
Yeah, I do tend to use that quite a lot. I don't use developing presets, although you could. So like your clarity and stuff like that, you could have that set up in your preset for your import.
Yeah.
So it does help you automate stuff, Stuart, if you've already got them imported, then you can use this sync settings. But as Andrew said, one has to be careful because sometimes it doesn't always work. But what I tend to do, for example, is in library, if I've just imported a bunch of pictures from a photo shoot and they're all, say, flash-based pictures, then I'll select them all in library and I'll change the color balance to them all in one hit.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You can do that. Right.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
In Elements too.
Okay, Andrew, are you any more to cover?
No, I mean, white balance is, for me, I think I hardly ever change white balance. Most cameras these days, I mean, this is an, right, this one, let's get rid of my presets over here. This one was a very old camera. I don't think the camera I use now would have got this wrong. I think this would have got the white balance right for this part of the image. And apart from this image, I couldn't find any other images in my catalog where it got the white balance wrong. So I think, you know, most of the time now, all I do with white balance is sometimes I will just look at the the cloudy one or the daylight one, sorry, the shade one, just to warm the image up a little bit.
Yeah.
Just to bring a bit of warmth in.
You leave your camera on auto white balance and
yes, yeah. So that's all I do. And then it's the other thing is, you know, white balance. So, you know, here I'm setting white balance to get this image looking right. But then once you've done all your exposure, your highlights, your shadows and everything, there's nothing to stop you adjusting the white balance creatively to sort of, you know,
something up
to get an image that you want. Or, you know, all these images, I warmed up the sky and I warmed up the water because, you know, it was a sunset and it was warm. From what I remembered when I was taking the images, it was a nice warm evening, and, you know, you wouldn't want a blue image, would you? You know, that's not a nice warm image. It looks cold.
Yeah, she got the ice one for that one.
Yeah.
I tend to check one or two images as I import a new photo shoot. And from the first few images, you can get a pretty good sense as to whether the white balance is going to be fine for them all, or whether you're going to have to touch them all and tweak them. So I think it's just you'll get the experience as you do this. I think it's important to cover it today to understand what white balance is, and to go into some of the adjustments and details a bit more, just to deepen the knowledge.
Yeah.
Because when the camera gets it right, it's great, but the knowledge is useful when the camera doesn't get it right.
Oh yeah, definitely. But yes, as
Or
you
if you're
say.
using infrared and you have to change it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, yes, that's a different kettle of fish.
For infrared, don't you have to go into Photoshop and flip the channels?
Yeah, but you have to do the white balance first and then flip it after.
That's
Right. Yeah, I have looked at it. Yeah.
That's for another session.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps that's the next one, isn't it? Angela,
I've already been talking with Angela, so we're lining her up.
Right.
Okay, guys, thank you. Could you give me control back, please, Andrew?
Yeah. So, when did you want to go on to, or have I overrun? Have I?
Well, I'm just thinking of time. We're at an hour.
Oh, are we? Sorry.
All right. We had questions. What more did you have?
Well, I was just going to quickly do the keystoning one. That's not very long.
Well, then just crack on with keystoning then.
Yeah, I've lost myself in Lightroom because I've got so many collections and so many.
If anyone's got a real problem, staying for a little longer, then obviously, just bow out. But yeah, we'll keep going, and then
Right. Well, I'll just run through. I mean, I'm a lot better at taking images of buildings now. I mean, this is an old image, and obviously from taking the image from slightly over on the right and where I took it, no amount of keystone correction is going to fix this one. So it's one of those things where you have to learn. So, going back I think about a year and a half later, I stood much more better in front of it, and I used it 70mm, the lens at 70mm, so I haven't got that much distortion in the image.
You're in the center of it.
Yeah. So if you go down, I think all your Lightroom, these may be in a different order because you can move them now. You can move them about, but I don't use the ones I don't use very often, I've moved to the bottom. So if you click in transform, you've got auto, which sometimes fixes it. So it straightens it, but it hasn't done anything about the fact that it's leaning in at the ends. And guided doesn't really do much. Level will just level the image, and then vertical, it just moves. It's basically rotates the image about the center towards you or away from you. And then the full one doesn't really do much either. But what is the most useful tool in this one is this little checker box here, or a wonky noughts and crosses. If you click on that one and then come over to the image, you can use the magnified view to click on the edge of the building. Oh no, sorry, you have to drag, sorry. And then drag down. Right. In the right place. And then when you do one over the other side, and let go. Oh.
Left a bit, right a bit.
Yeah, it's my mouse. My mouse is being a bit twitchy. It doesn't like being on Zoom. And then you can see that didn't work because I'm in the wrong place. But that's the idea. You pick, that's a little bit better. So you pick well, it's skewed it as well, but you pick a vertical either end of the image and you just draw these lines And if you don't quite like it, you can just rotate the lines very slightly, and it'll just keep redrawing it.
Wouldn't you put a grid up before you started it?
Yeah, would do normally, but when I did this last night, I drew 2 lines and it perfectly corrected it.
That was last night.
That's so true.
This one I done earlier.
Yeah.
Work with children and animals and pretty.
Yeah, oh, that's better. Look, it snapped. That's a little bit better. Yeah, I did one last night, and it did it perfectly the first time. Yes, I mean, I don't quite. It doesn't put. I don't think you can put a grid up in Lightroom, can you?
I don't. You can't always put a grid up.
Yeah, no. When you actually do the manual level, you can put a grid up.
You can do that.
Yeah, but when I did that last night, first time, it corrected the transformation.
Yeah, but you didn't have Zoom running at the time, so that might be why.
Yeah.
And you weren't screen.
Stage nerves.
Yeah, stage nerves. Let me just try it one more time. Is that better? No. It's almost there.
Principle's good enough. Yeah.
What? But basically that's the idea of the guided tool, and then you can if you think the image is leaning back or leaning forward, you can tweak it, and then you can do the same on the horizontal. You can rotate it that way. So that, and then I don't know why you do this. You can do that. Scale it.
Someone somewhere wanted that feature.
Yeah, but the main thing, let me just do it on this one. So this image here, oh, come on, load. So this, let me turn my blinkies off again. Let me, there we go. So this image here, so this is a little bit of a tip really. So if you're taking pictures of buildings and you know that you're going to have to keystone correct them afterwards, you need to zoom out more than you think. You need to give yourself a little bit of space around the image, because this one here, you can see that it's sloping and you can see that it's leaning back, but I wanted to keep these bicycles in. So now, but if I keystone correct this one, oh, my computer's having a meltdown. Oh. If I keystone correct this one, yeah, my computer is having a heart attack.
You're asking it to do a lot.
You're stuck in a corner.
Yeah, oh, see, I didn't put you there. It's having a right meltdown. Oh, I've got a spinning wheel. What is it doing? Oh, there we go.
A lot of adjustments.
Yeah. Well, it completely.
That's cool.
It completely froze. I can't move the guides. The guides just going all over the place. But basically, it's showing you what the problem with this image is. If I keystone correct this one, you can see that the bottom gets cropped in, and it completely means that I can't keep the image that I wanted. So
shift and tilt, that's what you need, Andrew.
Yeah, that was my next thing. If you want, buy yourself a shift and tilt lens at about 1,500 quid.
They're expensive.
Yeah.
But as you said at the beginning, Andrew, if you can get further away from the building and use a slightly longer lens.
Yes, so the longer focal length you can use when you take a building picture, the less distortion you'll have. And as you walk further back, you can keep the camera lower. So basically you're trying to keep the plane of the sensor level with the plane of the building, which is what the tilt shift lens lets you do. It lets you adjust the focal plane.
Also, the other thing is you can get a little bit higher up so that you're in level with the building sometimes.
Yeah.
You can do that too.
Yeah. And I mean, the other one that I was playing with last night was this one. Where's the uncorrected one? Oh, my computer is really having a meltdown. So I played with this one last night. Yeah, so the other thing you have to be careful with when you do keystone correction is what it can actually do to the image itself. So I've had several goes at doing this one, and this tower on the right hand side varies in height depending on which attempt you look at, and varies in width. So that's the other thing you've got to be careful with when you're keystoning the image. You know, you can actually end up, you can correct the uprights, but you can actually end up with an image that just doesn't look right. So I think that was the best one I got. I did that one in Photoshop with the perspective warp. Shall I just quickly show that and then we call it a day?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let me just find one that's incorrect.
We're losing a couple, but that's fine. Just keep going.
Right, let me just edit in. My computer doesn't die. Right, so you're still seeing Lightroom at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Let me go Photoshop. Right, you should have Photoshop now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Now, where was it? It was.
It's under filters, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had it there, perspective warp.
Yeah, but it wouldn't let me select it. It was grayed out. There we go.
Yeah, you had a locked layer.
Yeah. Where was it? Who said it? I had it last night. Oh, there we go. Perspective warp. No, it's not perspective warp. You're confusing me. It's not perspective warp. It is transform perspective. And then you can grab these corners and you can grab the image and you can tilt it and stretch it. But then what you have to do is, oh, why would it let me? It wouldn't let me. This is the problem I had last night when I was doing it. It wouldn't. I wanted to. Oh, there we go. I had to. That's it. So I had to do Command T afterwards to do free transform, and then I could stretch the image back up, because I reckon when I did the perspective warp, it made this tower too short.
Yeah. I shrunk it now.
Yeah. And then what I did last night was just to compare was the white layer I was working on. I just lowered the opacity a little bit so that I could just see the image underneath, to see what it was doing to the one.
The original image.
Yeah. But that's what I had to play with. So it's worth having a play with that. But I think it's one of those things where it will take you a little bit of playing to get a grip of what the perspective transformation does, and what images it will work on and what images it won't work on. So, I mean, if we turn this one off, you see that's worked quite well, I think. I mean, the difficult thing about this image is this path in the front bows slightly, but it actually did bow like that because it actually comes here and it's actually starting to go round and up there, which when I tried using some of the other correction tools, I think it confused them. It tried to straighten this path as well. Right, so if I stop sharing, we're all back. I hope that wasn't too painful.
No, thanks very much.
All right.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. That was very, very useful and very good. So
I'll go a bit slower next time. Yeah.
Well, this comes with experience, and personally, it helped me enormously that I didn't have to prepare tonight's meeting. So you helped me enormously. So I hope everyone got something out of that. And
yeah, but if anybody's got any questions, just pop them in the WhatsApp, and I'll answer them. Or I think somebody asked me about collections the other day in the app, and I was able to give them a YouTube video.
You said a £5 each, did you?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, of course, we're recording this session, so.
Oh, you're not, are you? Oh.
Yeah.
Turn up on YouTube, mate.
You've got to pay him now, Andrew, to stop him from showing it.
So as before, I'll put that up on YouTube, hopefully tomorrow, but as soon as I can. Can you give me host back, please, Andrew?
Yeah, if you remind me. Oh, I click on you, don't I?
On.
Yeah.
Right,
Make host.
on me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Perfect. Okay, so that's all we had for tonight. You got the dates for the submissions that we're looking for. Those will be in the recording as well if you didn't write them down. And we'll look again next week. If anyone's got any suggestions for next week, let me know. As we said earlier, I'm talking with Ange about doing an infrared session. So that should be fun. And we'll also look at maybe something like HDR as well. We could cover some topics like that. But if you've got any thoughts or ideas, do let me know. The last few topics we have managed to incorporate suggestions from people, so keep them coming.
Ray, I use HDR with my infrared as well.
Okay, good. All right then. Well, we'll yes. What we'll do, Angela, is we'll discuss when you're going to do it, and we'll look at what you want to do, and then you know, we'll go from there. And if there's scope to do a separate HDR session, we will. But if not, we won't.
What do you do your HDR in? Photoshop still?
Yeah, I don't use Lightroom at all.
No, I mean, I didn't know whether you used a third-party program for your HDR.
No, I just use Photoshop.
No.
Yeah, I've tried using the HDR tool in Photoshop, and I've had quite variable results. I prefer to use a plugin, but yeah, we can talk about that anyway near the time.
But just actually, Angela mentioning that she only works in Photoshop. So if you bring up the camera raw filter in Photoshop, all that white balance stuff is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's call it a day, and we'll see you all next week. And have a safe week. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye. Keep safe.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, definitely.
Bye.